Virtual Mobitel Google I/O Extended Sri Lanka 2019. That was, in fact, the completion of the local session 3. Amata Karandepa, the keynote from California, United States, coming up at 10:30 Sri Lanka time, the local time, and we have a little more time to go, and we have lots of exciting stuff lined up for you, and that was the completion of local session 3, mastering the art of Angampura with motion capture, which was covered by the exclusive discussion with the Prodigy interactive team. A big thank you to them, and also you can vote. Vote for your favorite local session. Ekada, dekada, tunada. Now you enjoyed 3 sessions, and it may be multiple sessions that you enjoyed, but you can do that because when you do that, we get your feedback and we get the chance of knowing your favorite session. All right, we are moving on to session 4. Get ready for session 4. Now, session 4 is all about island mentality versus startup mentality. Now, what kind of attitude do you have? What kind of mentality do you have when you think of a startup? Okay, good question. And this good question is going to be answered in a form of a panel discussion. Now, here are the panelists for this section of the session number 4. And we have Mangala Karunaratne, the Chief Executive Officer, Calcey Technologies. We have Chandika Jayasundara, co-founder and the Chief Executive Officer of Heyley. We have Heyley Evans, the Executive Director of Elovate Group. So we have 3 panelists. And we have a moderator. The moderator is Randhula de Silva, the Chief Executive Officer of Hatchworks. So get ready for the next session. Session number 4, which is Island Mentality versus Startup Mentality, moderated by Randhula. Over to you, Randhula.
Thank you, Clifford. Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to be here at Google I/O in 2019, speaking about this particular topic, island mentality versus startup mentality. A very warm welcome to the fantastic panelists we have with us this evening. Just to give a little intro into the discussion before we get into the fireworks. Why we picked this topic specifically is because Sri Lanka is actually budding into be a thriving startup ecosystem, which is about 10 years old. And we have a lot of interesting companies coming up, a lot of youth who want to do a lot of things differently. And we have people like themselves who've made it big there, working with startups very closely in supporting them to really come out and grow larger out there in the world. And this is the perfect time for us to really discuss how do we grow out of island mentality and embrace the startup mentality overall. So I think I would like to start with Chandika. Chandika, what are your perspectives on the Sri Lankan startup competitiveness in the world? Can we actually make our own unicorn?
Okay, so good to be here. So tough question, right? So a unicorn is all about scale, right? So the next question that follows is, what is scale? It's big markets, right? And it's going global. So any startup starts with 1, 5, 10 customers. And so that's fairly easy here, right? So the next question is, how do you find the rest of it? So when you think, can we have our own unicorn? It's defined by what market you pick, right? And so the markets, the problem that you're trying to solve has to be applicable to a large market globally. So having a unicorn that is fully domestically based, yes, a rupee unicorn we can have, right? But a dollar unicorn, it's going to be very, very hard being domestically based, right? Yeah. So the next question is, can we have a unicorn that is started here and catering to markets, nearby? Say India, that's the most popular choice. That's also quite hard because, say you want to run Sri Lanka as a test market and take your product to the region, particularly in technology or software or software-related services, it's things move so fast. So by the time that you're testing something here, similar people in the regional markets would also see the same problem, and they'd be doing it. So how do you solve this problem? So you have to find problems that are unique, that you have a natural advantage in, and the kind of problem that you can scale. So, so generally, if you're picking something that is, say, logistics-based or things that have like an operational component, it's much harder to scale. From what we've seen in Sri Lanka so far, say it's our local taxi operator, it's going to be very hard for them to compete with Uber or Grab in the regional regions or Ola, right? But say, but a pure play software company, right, has much better chances of doing that. For example, we have a couple of companies that are already, unicorn or close to unicorn status that has roots in Sri Lanka, like say Virtusa or WSO2 and so on and so forth, right? So these companies are going there, and these are not overnight things. It's 10-year, 15-year slogs, right? So for us to have unicorns, so our entrepreneurs and startups who are starting things need to pick problems that can scale globally. So, for example, at Creately, our mission is to make drawings and diagramming a first-class citizen of the productivity suite. So most people draw and write on paper, but that doesn't translate well into digital devices, right? So that's an agnostic problem, as in that does not is not bound to this market. People all over the world have this problem. So, and we understand the problem quite well because we don't have to be sitting next to our customer to understand the problem, right? It's a common problem, and that problem applies to people around us. So we can give a good solution regardless of us being able to sit next to a customer that it doesn't matter whether the customer is in the US or Australia or Sri Lanka or India or in Japan, right? Or generally most of these customers will have the similar class of problem. So our product can scale to those things and solve that problem in a generic way. So that brings scale, and that helps us go there. So I think if we have had success with pure play software companies, and if we have pure play software companies that are products that has less of a service component and solves generic enough problems that we can understand customers and provide unique solutions, we can have unicorns, right? But it's a lot of work, to tell you the truth.
So get cracking is your suggestion. Yeah. Heyley, I'll move on to you. Building on from Chandika's perspective, how do you think we can advance the competitiveness of Sri Lankan startups?
Oh, yes, and thank you. I'm glad you got the unicorn question. So it's such a great question, and I think, so many things that you said I completely agree with. And for me, just stepping from that, particularly a point that you were alluding to, and that is, I personally think the first big thing that needs to be the disruption or the decision that we make is to stop thinking about island mentality and startup mentality. They're not two different things. We have to not define ourselves by geography, ethnicity, all of those things that come into it. We actually just need to define ourselves as a business community. And we need to start thinking about what the world wants. And, you mentioned something about solving problems. We need to start thinking about, when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about building companies, it's all about finding a problem and solving it for someone and really understanding what that problem is. And I think we have to think like a customer. When we grow a business, you think like your customer, you solve their problems, and that's how you create a successful business. To disrupt and put Sri Lanka on a global stage, we need to start thinking like global operators. We need to think about the global problems, not define ourselves as small or a small, we were having a little bit of a discussion earlier around a sister to India or Vietnam or an outsourced provider. We shouldn't define ourselves as that. We're so much more than that. Sri Lanka is so rich with talent and energy, and the people are kind and hardworking. And they're all things that go into a mix to create incredible businesses that people all over the world want to deal with. People deal with people. They buy people. Your product can be phenomenal, but if people either don't value it or want it, then it doesn't matter. And it also doesn't matter where it's based or located. So I guess if that answers the question, I think the first thing we need to do is stop thinking in two different ways. stop thinking at a local level, start thinking of ourselves in a bigger space. You know, like that, what's the saying? You know, you think of yourself as a lion rather than a small animal.
Cat.
And that's the first point that I would say.
Thanks, Heyley, really. I appreciate your insights also to disrupt the title of the conversation today itself. Stop diversifying between the two and really merge it together and shake it all up and really get yourself out there and do the work. I think that's a very strong message for us to take forward.
Definitely, and certainly around definitions. How do we define ourselves? You know, are we defining ourselves in these incubator collaboration centres as Sri Lankan-based small startups, or are we saying we are in an ecosystem of a startup culture that is going to take on the world and create incredible products that are going to solve incredible things and become a unicorn?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to come back to that on the next round, really, on how to take our message out, because you're also a specialist in transforming perception. So I think we can really use your insights on that as well. Mangala, I'm going to come to you because you're dealing with a lot of international markets and you are an international player yourself. You established your company initially in the Valley. So my first question to you is, what helped you to get to where you are? Being a Sri Lankan, establishing there, coming here, and now serving the world. What did you do differently? How did you get there?
Very good question. So, just to give a little history, so initially I tried to work with Sri Lankan clients, and then only I went international. But when we started going international, one thing that really helped me was immediately I made some connections with people based locally there, like Silicon Valley. So having these Silicon Valley partners, ships, I mean, I give them founder equity and brought them in and work with them. So that really helped. And then we didn't like try to go global immediately. We just chose one market. And we studied that market, we focused on that market, and we just put all our energy into that market. So once you break into that, then we knew, okay, we're going to go from Silicon Valley maybe to New York. And then New York to, again, we came back to California and like looked further south. Things like that. So we didn't go global, we went Silicon Valley. And then apart from making that local relationships and partnerships to capture the market, I think the other thing is, I'm not speaking about every Sri Lankan company, founder or startup, but quite a bit of Sri Lankans think 90% is perfection. No. So we always religiously delivered on time, and for us the perfection is 100%. So because we are a vendor, so it's not our own product. So when you're building your own product, that's okay. You can
iterate.
yeah, iterate. But when you're selling it to somebody, you have to sell a perfect thing. So we never compromise on the quality.
Yeah, so be uncompromising is one thing, and also really drive in towards your focus and work towards one target without really spreading yourselves too thin, for starters.
Yeah.
Is
And
one of your key
also
messages.
understand that market, study that market, know the compliance requirements. Let's say you're going to Europe. I mean, right now there's GDPR and all that things. You can't just launch globally and expect. That's why. So there's a little bit of a due diligence.
So
Deep
I'm going
dive
to
into
really
it.
spin that question to you again, because you're also beyond CEO and founder of Calcey. You also sit with Slascom. You work with a lot of startups as a mentor and also as an investor. What do you really see in our startups? And is there a gap that we need to bridge in terms of going out there in the world? What's needed in the world? What's needed in the market? And what's produced here? Is there a gap that you see? And what specifically do you see as characteristics of the startups we have
We
here?
have great engineering talent. We have great. I think we have very passionate founders, and they are really good at engineering and building products, etc. However, I also think some uh, think building the product will is it. It's not. That's only half the problem, or maybe 30% of the problem. So once you have, before even building the product, like you have to understand what empathy, like you said, understand the customers and all that. You can't just build what you think is right. So there's quite a bit of understanding that market and what the customer want and all that. And then you kind of have to strategize your launch plans. I mean, we talk about like how companies, when they go, when the product is launched, you don't just, think, I mean, just because having like some Google AdWords and Facebook ads not going to bring you customers. It's a lot more than that. It's a lot of work, like Chandika said.
Thanks, Mangala. Thank you. Chandika, I'm going to give you the same question I initially asked Mangala, because you yourself started as a Sri Lankan company working now globally with a lot of large-scale global players. What helped you to get to where you are, and what are your best giveaways, I would ask, for anybody who's listening in?
So, so when we started the company, we looked at solving a problem, and so when we looked at the problem space, our competitors were basically Microsoft and a couple of Silicon Valley companies, right? So from day one, we recognized them as our competition, and we built the product to basically differentiate and beat them in the game. Not in everything, but for a certain bunch of customers, our product would be more appealing than theirs. So that's the number one thing, right? As in, you have to have something unique that you want to sell to a sensible set of customers, and we figured we can scale that customer base, and also how to build a funnel to get those customers onto our door, right? So we've been always customer driven, right? And that's basically the play. And because we always considered the entire everyone, as in the internet is just the internet. It's just flat. It doesn't matter where you are, right? So we compete on the same things. We compete for the same customers. So we have to be better, right? So we also utilize our advantages here. So we have great engineers in our team, and we have good talent pool, and our baseline operational cost is much lower. So we could spend more time we could invest more time in building things compared to our competitors at the early days. But now our market has matured, and things are moving much faster in a different pace. So so that's a different story. But you asked me a different question. So I'm
Keep talking, really. It was just getting interesting.
yeah. So anyhow, what helped us get here? Being custom focused, right? Being unrelenting, as in. So in our early days, we could have made lots of easy money by customizing our product for lots of big companies, right? Lots of big name brand companies. Oh, we really like this. This is great. We could solve this problem with it. Would you be able to build this for us, that for us? But our end game was always having reaching this scale. So if we went and built services and solutions for 1, 2, 3, 4 customers, we are not building a scalable business. So we said no to a lot of money so that we could get here later. So it takes commitment and sacrifice upfront, and having a clear objective of where you want to go. So everything else just falls into place as long as you have you have the guts to go the distance, right?
And one more question. I think I just got an idea when you were talking about rejecting opportunities. Would you remember a specific experience where you wish that you or your organization did differently from where you started to now? Would you have changed anything that you did too?
Millions of things. So we made so many mistakes, right? But one generic mistake that cost us greatly was what the other than Microsoft, there was one other market leader, and we were miles ahead of them, years ahead of them, and their primary revenue source was one partner platform that they were driving their sales from, and we could have basically gone in there and taken that market away and crushed them. But we were being defensive and thought, let's not bother them. Let's go on to this other platform that is competing with that, which is, say, the bigger play is A. They own 80% of the market. The other partner is B, owns 10% of the market. We said, this is the first integration that we're doing. We'll go with the small one, and then we go to the big one. By the time we went to the small one, it took so much time. When we got around to the big one, those guys had caught up, and we lost our chance. So, be bold, right? As in, take your competitors head on, and basically go for it.
So have more faith and confidence also in yourself and your product when you go out there.
Yeah, as in nobody won a war by being timid. So
That's a good
you
takeaway.
gotta, it's in this space, right? As in particularly in software and services and most problems that you solve, it's mostly winner takes all market, right? As in the primary player, Google owns 70% of the search market, I guess, right? Chrome owns such a large percentage, right? Microsoft Office owns so much of the productivity market. Uber owns so much of the taxi market. So it's one brand for one problem. So you should always try to be the one brand if you want to be a unicorn. So you have to solve the problem, as in you have to go for it.
Be
Otherwise, if you're not
relentless,
going for it, you're always going to be second, third, fourth, fifth. And as in, I believe you should risk it. Yeah, so you might also burn out.
Just a flagging. So just building on to that, Heyley, I've seen this a lot also and heard a lot of stories of people who've competed outside of Sri Lanka, startups who go out there to look at competitions. They come back and say, oh, hey, these guys have a far less superior product than we do. We are way better. Our solution is much more comprehensive and advanced, getting more and more ideas of Chandika's experience, really. But yet, they don't really seize the opportunity. And their focus is elsewhere. And earlier on the discussion that when we spoke about prior to coming on air, is also where do we focus on? How do we expand on quality? Where do we focus on as a service provider? Where do we thrive on? And what do we need to focus on as an ecosystem in giving our services out? Heyley, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and I think I certainly agreed with so much of what both of the gentlemen said, particularly around, picking your lane, going for it. Success is about timing. It's about judgment. It's about, taking those gut moments and having the courage to act on it. And, it's a classic case when you see businesses or you compare yourself. We talked about knowing your customer, but you also really, really intimately need to know your competitors and what they're doing well, what your sort of inroad is, or if you can do it better or different, or you're solving a different problem. And we see it all the time, right? We see that the technology that some particular business has is far superior, and yet that business that's less superior is going guns a-ho. And I think it really comes down to, and Mangala touched on it a little earlier, is there's really, in my mind, very simplistically, and I like to simplify the complicated, but three things that really make a successful business. One is, yes, your technology or your service. You've got to bed that down. You've got to know your stuff in that area. Yes, you need to know your commercials. You need to have a financially sound business model. If you don't have a good finance person, go out and get one and get that sorted. And the third piece is desirability. And this is where it falls down a lot. People get so wedded and obsessed to creating the perfect solution or the perfect piece of technology. And what we forget is that desirable element of what do people want? What do people want to experience? What do they want to feel, touch, use day to day? And where we see it, particularly, we're all in the technology space. We see it all the time. Hugely intelligent, amazing people coming up with these fantastic pieces of technology. And then it falls flat because you can have the best technology or the best product in the world, and if no one wants to buy it, then you're kind of screwed. I think it's that. I think it's really making sure you've got all the pieces of the puzzle. The other thing is discipline. It is boring, it is unsexy, but you've got to be disciplined, whether it's getting up at 4:30 in the morning or, however you shape your day, how you use your time. It's the only thing that you can't get back. How you choose to use that time is so incredibly important. And one of my experiences here, I've nearly been here 3 years now, and one of my first frustrations of doing business here in Sri Lanka was people's relationship with time. And Sri Lankans, my colleagues, my family, my friends are incredibly wonderful, kind people. But when I first got here, when people wouldn't turn up for meetings on time or be late, I would want to smash my head up against a brick wall, because our relationship to time is so important. And if we want to, as a community and as a nation, if we want to play on a global scale, you need to be cognizant of that and really respect it. That's my bandwagon. There you go.
Thank you. I think we have a lot of great takeaways there, because the discussion is also about what changes do we ourselves make and are conscious of in order to be world ready.
Yeah.
We can't just blame the world. We can't just blame the country. We also have to look inside and see what we can do. So I'm very glad that you touched upon those points as well. But I'm just going to spin the ball to the other end right now, Mangala. When it comes to you, you are a large player now in Sri Lanka. You're just shaking your head. And you deal with a lot of offshore businesses. So what do you think what do you identify as the critical changes we need to make as a country, as an ecosystem, in order to make our businesses, not just startups, but businesses, more competitive out there in the world? So it's like a more large-scale perspective that I'm requesting from you.
Great question. You planned for me, no? I think that in this day and age, this is a global economy. For us to be attracted or to work very successfully globally, there are few things we could definitely improve. Number one, I think, is the predictability. From the government regulations to whatnot, if it keeps changing every year, every budget, without, it gives a shock to business people or the investors or the global partners. That's not good. We need to be able to predict and have that stability. And the other few other things is we should be a little bit more liberal with opening our doors for our global partners to come here and work with us. I'm not talking about giving jobs to foreigners. It's different. When I started Calcey, I wanted to give shares to one of my American co-founders. Sri Lanka doesn't have a law to give shares to a foreign co-founder. He has to invest. The money has to come through a CR account, and then they get the shares. That's how it works. So I paid him to invest back. So, these are fundamental things. If you were to really become a true global ecosystem player, if you want to make at least a little blip in there, we need to be a little bit more global friendly. I think these are the ones that comes to my head straight away.
Chandika, do you want to add on to
Chandika
that?
probably has other stuff too,
So being less restrictive is it's just the attitude, right? It's how you, are we open for business or are we somewhat open for business? That's what it is.
Yeah.
I know there are shady things that can happen when we open our doors, but that's what efficient government regulation and policing is for. and but you should let the people who are doing honest work do it freely, right? So we need to, as in, and also as in, I'm a big believer in leading with trust, right? Trust first. So if you have to give trust to and then be open to get things. So so if you're treating everyone who comes from outside as you're not sure, don't know who this is, sort of thing, it's gonna be hard to attract people. It's gonna be hard to attract investment. It's gonna be hard to attract customers. A lot of friction there. So
Yeah. I
fundamentally
think,
being more open is important.
like you said, I think we also have a habit of if somebody use a knife wrongly, we have a habit of banning knives rather than
Exactly.
putting the guy in jail.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, and I think it's creating a sense
Yeah.
of for the creating a rule for the mass instead of the the minority.
minority bad people.
Yeah,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's as in
Yeah.
it's
Or the exception. Yeah.
Yeah.
as in I think as a country and a as a governing body and so on, we have a fair bit to mature as a community, because we've had so many bad experiences. We're suspicious. That's okay, but so I don't think we need to think about these things. These are as in for a there are lots of companies here who's doing great business, even when bombs are going off, or when terrorists are we had them for 30 years, we have them now again. Still, people who are doing it, people are doing it. So we need to stop finding excuses and just get things
yeah.
done. So so none of these things matter, particularly for companies like companies in technology, because the internet is always open for business, even sometimes via a VPN, right? So still, it's always open for business, right? And your customers are always there. So you just have to get the work done, be it from home, be it from wherever, and your business shall flourish. So
And also, like, I mean, we of course we're speaking about a lot of problems, but also as entrepreneurs, our job is to look for opportunities.
Absolutely.
So if there are a lot of problems, solve them ourselves and look at a business opportunity there. So that's what entrepreneurship is about. So we cannot keep on complaining and do nothing and expect something. So we'll have to be the one who takes those problems head on and and figure out business opportunities out of those.
This is what I think repetitively say out there wherever I am also, that Sri Lankan private sector is an amazing collective of people and companies who've always gone beyond the possibilities that's laid out by the government itself or the ecosystem or the infrastructure itself, and always made benchmarks and always done beyond the possibilities, and everything else have just caught up, fallen into place. So I think the private sector and especially the entrepreneurs, the creative, innovative entrepreneurs, lead the way, hold the leash into the future. So I'm so glad that we have three people right here who's doing that on a daily basis. So to end up, I think, Heyley, I have one more question to you. We all spoke about how resilient our people are, how phenomenal Sri Lanka is, how much talent we have, and how great products we have here. With all of this, how do you think us as a community, us as a startup ecosystem, mark ourselves in the world? How do we get ourselves on the map? How do we communicate differently? Or what more do we need to do?
We've heard it all before.
So I think it firstly comes back to that first point, which is about disrupting the way we define ourselves and taking it from and we were having a little talk about it earlier, from a local perspective, looking at everything's locally, and actually think, if you want to be, what's the saying is, if you want to, the flattery is the best compliment, or whatever it is. If you want to talk, walk, and be on a global stage, do all of those things. Start being in that way. The other thing that I will say, and this is purely an experience that I've had over the last couple of years, is we need to stop being apologetic, and we need to stop being overwhelmingly grateful that people choose Sri Lanka or businesses here, in our experience, to do business here. We are so rich with talent. We have incredible products coming out. We have incredible businesses. You know, we have hugely successful companies that we've already discussed. And we have really, really incredible startups that are here that have, you know, the legs that could go hugely far. But we have to stop being apologetic and we have to be proactive. You know, the amount of people when I was building my team here, and we're very fortunate to have 168 people on the ground here, the amount of people that would come and interview and they were so bright and so incredibly talented, and then they would tell me all the bad things about themselves or the things that they weren't good at. And I was like, hang on, this is a job interview. Shouldn't you be selling yourself to me? And I think that was probably an example of what I think we as a country can do better. We can really promote our talent. We can promote who we are without losing the beautiful, kind, incredible nature of Sri Lankan people. But let's not be apologetic. Let's go and win business. Let's stand side by side with some of the best companies in the world because we deserve to be on the same stage.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm a guest in this country, but I certainly have called it my home for now 3 years. And we can stand side by side. Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that's a fantastic note to end with. So to sum up, I think we spoke about thinking big, being ruthless, being unapologetic, being disciplined, really knowing your markets, getting your work and getting your work done and being super serious about it, and really driving yourselves towards your end objective and saying no when you have to, and also saying yes just because you can. I think those are like the key giveaways out of this discussion. To sum up in a fun note, it has already been fun, but just to add on to the fun, a quick rapid fire to the three amazing people here. Chandika, starting from you, Apple or Android?
Apple.
Heyley, what time do you wake up in the morning, just because you spoke about it?
4:13.
I thought so. Mangala, what's your favorite holiday?
Snowboarding.
Snowballing, all right then. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and hope you actually would latch on to the giveaways that we had here and really grow yourselves out there to be larger than the world itself. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
We've heard it all before. Good things come to those who wait. It's not the right time.